Welcome to What Happened on Saturday with Marlon Kerner. Marlon, how you doing?
I am doing particularly well today, Josh, and I'm sure you are feeling so much better after
Yes,
that stirring Notre Dame victory last week.
absolutely. Well, yes, 80% of me enjoyed it. 20% of me was playing the what if game. And the oh man, if only game, which is pretty unique to college football. I was thinking about that compared to the NFL, where if you have a bad loss, you have two bad losses until you're eliminated from the playoffs, week to week still matters quite a bit. And like we
Right.
talked about before, for my Irish, two losses, it doesn't end the season, obviously, but it ends the realistic path to the college football playoff. And
Absolutely.
that's the frustrating part of college football until we expand next year. If this was next year, they absolutely would still have a chance to sneak into the top 12. So, kind of a bit of unfortunate timing. But I have to say, it's always enjoyable to kick USC's ass. And it was particularly enjoyable.
Absolutely.
It was particularly enjoyable to me the way it happened because, I was expecting if Notre Dame's going to win, it's going to have to be ball control, keep Caleb Williams off the field. That mixture of things that everybody kind of assumed it'd have to be. Man, they dominated him. Like that defensive game plan, the defense was flying around. He looked confused to me for one of the first times in his career.
Yes.
He was slow. He didn't look like the first pick in the draft. And obviously everybody's going to have a bad game here or there, but just the manner in which the Notre Dame defense, Al Golden's game plan, the manner in which they just took him apart was pretty shocking to watch.
It really was. Yes. But before we dive deeper into that, let's do a quick little weekend roundup in case some of the people that are going to be watching this episode didn't really pay attention to what happened in college football. So if we go back to last week was week 7 in the college football format. So Georgia rolled, Michigan rolled, Ohio State rolled over Purdue. We'll talk about that game briefly, but we have a big test coming up this week that we probably will spend a little bit more time on this episode talking about. Florida State rolled, Penn State rolled 63-0 over UMass, right? So
Yeah.
the game that was kind of crazy, which was back and forth, was that 7-8 matchup, was probably one of the best games of the weekend. That Washington-Oregon game.
Fun game.
So much fun to watch. I couldn't believe Washington was able to come back late. And even after all the miscues and some of the things that coaching did, again, we always talk about games where coaching will come down and matter. And coaching came down and really mattered in this Washington-Oregon game because you scored with – it was kind of one of those things like, all right, coaching-wise, you have the flip side of each one of it, right? Did you leave too much time? You scored so quickly if you're Washington when you got the ball back. And then all of a sudden, I didn't really understand why they just let some too many seconds roll off the clock when you had timeouts. You had time to get the ball closer, to make it an easier field goal kick, or even take a couple shots to the end zone and see if you could score, because they really didn't do too much to slow down your offense except for those last few possessions. So it's kind of interesting to see on both sides of how they wanted to try to play it and approach it. And at the end of the game, Oregon still had a chance to win that game.
Yeah, they
and
sure
they
did.
did
And
a good job of putting themselves there.
Something I wanted to ask you about that game. It obviously came up here locally in the Bills game as well. I tend to be kind of new school, aggressive, go for it on fourth down. But the Oregon coach and Brian Daboll in the Giants Bills game kind of faced the same decision at the end of the first half, where you're down to one play. It's clearly going to be one play. Neither one of them took the points. And, you can make the argument that in the Oregon-Washington game, you need to score touchdowns rather than field goals. But I felt like at the end of the first half there for Oregon, I kind of first guessed him. I respect him as a coach. I respect his aggressiveness. I just felt like you take the points there at the end of the half. A, psychologically, you want to get points before the end of the half.
Right.
B, I don't like that all or nothing, because part of the benefit of going for it on fourth down, if you're deep in the other team's territory, is you leave them with the ball at the 3-yard line if you don't get it. But obviously, at the end of the half, that is not a part of the calculation. Right. So I don't know how you feel about that, but I feel like that's a unique situation at the end of the half where I'd almost always take the 3 there, because the ancillary benefit of not getting it and pinning them deep is off the table.
Exactly. And I think you brought up the right scenario, right? It's right before the half. You always want to try to get points before the half. Obviously, you want a touchdown in that situation, but you have a guaranteed 3 points, and you always take the points because you never know if that's going to be the difference in the game. And had he kicked the field goal, now you're playing for the win, And now you have a chance and an opportunity to go to overtime, or even Washington calls different plays and they do some things differently. They may even go for a 2-point to say, hey, we're going to try to go for the win now. So it makes the game different. And I was just watching that, like, that's kind of interesting. I love his aggressive nature. There was definitely some questionable moments in that game with the field goal, leaving the points there, going for it on 4th down to give them the ball back, where you could pin them deep and make them go and drive down the length of the field. Like, all those things, when you start thinking about it, like, hey, does that make sense? And what you called, when sometimes you just got to trust your players and trust that we've practiced this, we've talked about it enough. Now I need you to go out and execute. But he stuck to his guns. And as a coach, I always love to hear what coaches say afterwards. And he owned up to it. He said, there's definitely this was on me. There were some things that I could have done better as a coach. And so you always love to see coaches kind of come back and say, you know what, maybe in hindsight, I should have done something differently. But he's always been aggressive. And so I don't mind an aggressive coach being true to who he is. It's just when it doesn't work, you just got to come back and say, that's on me. Doesn't mean I'm going to change who I am. It's just, that's on me, and I'll take the loss. And so you'll figure it out next time. You'll figure out when to do that better in the situations. But you're absolutely right. Like, those 3 points really did come back and haunt them. And that made it why they ended up losing. It was very aggressive play calling in situations like that. Doesn't make any sense in that situation.
And the NFL game, the Giants are a big underdog. I can even understand it more in that vein, where you need to have a few plays where you maximize whatever advantages you have. This Oregon-Washington game was a true coin flip. And I feel like you're on the road, you get through the first half, take those points there, and you set yourself up for the second half. They always talk about how it's, you're trusting your players, and it kind of works both ways, right? Like, if you go for it on 4th down at the 35 and you don't punt, you're saying you trust your offense, but you're almost saying you don't trust your defense, right? Like, isn't there kind of a give and take there? Like, if you're one of the defensive guys, it's, hey, give me the long field and we'll stop them. So I wonder, is there ever kind of that conflict? Did you ever kind of think about, hey, coach trusts one side of the ball more than the other? It's kind of a hard balance there, because obviously you trust your players, but which players do you trust?
Well, I mean, that they're an offensive minded program. Like, they're known for being able to score points. They've been putting up a lot of points this year. So as a player, you just kind of go into it. You really try to take the mindset of your coach, and you understand that, hey, coach is going to go for it in certain situations. And so you understand that, and you understand how you should play and what you should be expected to do, and how you're going to approach these scenarios in this situation. So I'm pretty certain in that scenario, players are like, okay, we know coach is going to go for it. We've got to be up to the task. And there's times when captains have to go and say, hey, coach, punt it. Like, there's got to be a coach, a voice of reason that's on the sideline. Like, listen, coach, we like our defensive chances, but give us some opportunities. Don't put us where we're so close and back up against the field. Like they went for it on 4th down, and all of a sudden Washington has the ball and they score in 2 plays, literally 2 plays, like touchdown, bam, bam, touchdown. Here we go. Oh my gosh, we're down. Where I would have loved to see the defense be able to maybe get a rhythm, see if they can get the pressure that they have been able to bring on Michael Penix Jr. And just really see what they could have done, and maybe see if they could have been a little bit more aggressive. But when you're in your own field, you understand, if I do make a mistake on a play, the ramifications are a lot different than when I have the length of a field. Because if I miss a tackle, or I gamble on a play and we tackle him for a 15-yard or 20-yard gain, hey, I still got a little bit more to go. If I miss a play and they're already on the plus 50, and I miss a 20-yard, hey, they're at our 30, they're at our 25, depending on where the ball is. So now I've got to think a little differently. I'm going to play maybe can't be as aggressive as I might want to be, because I'm leaving my corners one-on-one on an island. And they I mean, that Washington offense rolled. Like, they did some really good things. They made some really great adjustments in the second half. They got their playmakers the ball, and Oregon's corners played really good for most of the game until that last drive was unreal. Like, just the back shoulder fade in the end. Like, man, it's an amazing throw. So
it's pretty incredible the caliber of athlete that they've been able to recruit to Washington. You don't think about Washington as having maybe the best receiving core in all of college football. And I mean, I get Penix is kind of a draw, but man, that's not exactly the easiest place to recruit, historically. And I was thinking during that game, how fun is it that both of these teams next year are going to be in the Big Ten? And they're going to walk teams like Iowa and Purdue and Indiana and all your, perennial doormats that Ohio State just rolls over every year. But I'm hoping that it kind of kind of kicks all of these Big Ten programs kind of in the ass a little bit to be like, we've got to keep up with teams like that. You're going to have to come into the 21st century. Like I watched a little bit of Iowa, Wisconsin. It was 15-6, and there was almost no hope of scoring a touchdown. It reminded me of watching like late 80s NFL. Like there was no offense, there was no flow, there was no urgency. They were running the play clock down on almost every play to 4, 5, 6 seconds. It almost seemed like neither team wanted the ball.
Yeah, but I think those coaches understand like this is going to be a defensive battle, right? When you get those low scores, you don't have the weapons on the outside that you can get it to, which is amazing to see how Oregon and Washington are built. They're built for scoring points. Now, what they're going to have to be able to do is play stronger and more stout defense, because they're going to come up against some teams that can score points with them, but also play a little bit better defense and maybe slow their offense down. But what you don't want to do when they come to the Big Ten, to your point, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, those teams are Maryland will shoot out with them. Now, can they get an interception here or there? That's where it's going to probably take some of those Pac-12 teams a little bit longer to get how the physicality and the different style of defense that they're going to be expected to play to compete in the Big Ten. But make no mistake about it, when you're scoring 63, 70 points a game, you're going to be in the lead in a lot of those games. And some of the Big Ten teams aren't built to play catch-up football. So I think they could kind of take some teams by surprise. It'll still come down to maybe one of the Pac-12 joiners and then my Buckeyes, the Wolverines, when you start looking at it like that, they historically will play some really good defense and slow those offenses down. So it'll be interesting to see how Washington, Oregon can adjust. And then we'll see. We'll find out really soon.
Yeah.
And if Caleb Williams stays, it looks right. It'll look different.
It made me really excited. It was the first time that I thought to myself, wow, like just the caliber of play in the Big Ten and the potential matchups going forward are just going to get way better. When you introduce USC and UCLA and Oregon and Washington, like it just raises the level of the entire conference. And I don't always have to watch, the noon kickoff or the 4 p.m., the Wisconsin Purdue game, or, they're not going to all put me to sleep. At least these teams, even when they're not good, they're fun. And they're entertaining. And it's, I guess I'd rather be bad and entertaining than bad and dull. And I think that's, I don't know if you're following like the whole the Iowa offensive coordinator saga, where it's Kirk Ferentz's son. And he actually has it built into his contract that they need to average 25 points a game, or his contract will not be renewed. And when you get to the point where you're putting specific markers of point scoring, which is just a terrible metric overall to judge an offensive coordinator.
Yes.
It's terrible. But they're so frustrated with kind of the nepotism and just the dull football that they've played for so long. They've been successful. They played complimentary football, all that, everything we could talk about. But man, it's a tough watch. And when it comes down to it, college football is supposed to be entertaining and fun. And it's just a tough watch. Like even if you win 15-6, it's like, all right, I guess, okay.
Right. Yeah. I mean, anytime you have that clause in your contract, that lets you know you got to be really, really good, which means you got to think outside of the box, take chances. But what happens when you don't have traditionally the horses, so to speak, or the athletes on the outside and in the backfield and the quarterback that can move the offense to the needle and the level that you need it to be? And so as an offensive coordinator, you're like, man, I'm not going to have this position next year. So
yeah.
Okay, I'm moving. And that's where the transfer portal will begin to even and equal things out, because they can really go out and get some guys. They can go get some players next year in Iowa to kind of match up and get. And if the offense does that, but we know he won't be the offensive coordinator.
Right. It's like a chicken and egg scenario, right? Like the guys won't come there because they don't have the offense to sustain success. But then you can't sustain success without the athletes to come there. So it's just kind of this like chicken and egg scenario with all these programs. And like I said, I just watching that game, Oregon, Washington, you just felt like, hey, they're going to help kick some of these Big Ten teams. They're going to be forced to change, kind of whether they want to or not, because be able to keep up with those guys over the course of 60 minutes, you're going to have to score points. Speaking of scoring points and coaching, I know you want to talk about your boy Dion and Colorado. Man, what the hell happened?
Man, it was ugly. I don't understand. I think there was a lot that went on in that game. And I watched the first half. I'm like, okay, it's 29-0. This should be a cakewalk. And I literally turned off the TV and said, I'm going to bed. Like, that's it. I'm done. 29-0. Like, Colorado is playing great. They were clicking on all cylinders. I'm like, okay, I want to see what the score is. And then I get up the next morning to find out that they lost in spectacular fashion. I think it was one of those things where we always talk about the bravado that Deion has and the way his players play, and Shedeur always going to the section and doing this and showing off his watch. And I loved how at the end of it, Stanford did the same thing to the Colorado student sections. I love that. I think that is why you love college football. You love to see it. And for people that are saying it was wrong or he shouldn't have done that, like, listen, if you're going to do it when you win, you got to, and people are going to do it to you when you lose. You got to be able to take it on both sides of it. So stop it. That's what the big thing about college football is you come in here and you flex on me and show me your watch because you beat me on my field. Well, if I beat you on your field, I'm going to show you my imaginary watch or kind of do your same thing that you do because you were going to do it to me if you were on my field. So it's this new rivalry that was there. But when you look at that game, what ended up happening was I thought that, one, there was definitely some coaching mistakes on Colorado's side because it just started snowballing. Like, I'm watching how they attacked and played their receivers. Travis Hunter played a lot, but he missed 3 games. And so I thought they should have had him on a pitch count, in particular on defense, where you're going to be where he was more in a liability because he was such a big focal point of their offense. And then all of a sudden, you want him to go back and do all these things and match up on their receiver. And he was a burner. He could flat out fly and he could run. And he made some really good catches on Travis at the end. And we saw the one where he tied it up, where he caught it on Travis's back on his head. But that's one of those situations like, okay, Travis looks tired. There's situations and scenarios you have to recognize that, like, he needs to come out, like, get him a blow, put somebody else in there. And if you don't feel confident in whoever else you have back there, then play a zone, play something different to give him a blow to kind of protect him. But we all knew where the ball was going to start going. And it was amazing to really see what happened when you just look like, I mean, their receiver, and I'm going to say his name around, but A. Manor had 13 catches, 294 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, it was unreal. It was like night and day. They couldn't find him in the first half, right? Like, they were taking shots, couldn't hit it, and all of a sudden it clicked. And there was one thing that really stood out to me because anybody that's listening probably saw the highlights of it where he took it. They were on their 3-yard line. And you run a blitz. Like, nobody runs a blitz where you're like, listen, it's either all or nothing. Like, if he catches this, there's nobody behind him. Like, because you want him to really be like, hey, I want you to kind of throw it short. I want you to do all the things. We're going to come up and tackle you because we just want to flip the field. All of a sudden, he makes that catch, makes the corner misses. The safety takes an angle where he just outruns the angle. And now you're like, oh my gosh, like, now they have momentum. And once that momentum swung on that, Stanford just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. Shedeur held onto the ball a little bit, and he throws an interception in overtime. Like, in the overtime, he throws an interception. And now all of a sudden, Stanford's like, all we got to do is kick a field goal. We know that. So you run the ball, you get where you want the ball to be, you kick a field goal, game's over. And, you hear Deion's now press conference of, they've got to decide if they want to be dedicated and understand they do what they need to do. I think it was a perfect example of asking your players to do something that maybe they weren't ready for yet. But those are the lumps and the growing pains that you have to take as a player to get to the level where you want to be. Sometimes you're going to have games like this. So kudos to Stanford, but I couldn't believe that they blew that lead. And it just set up for just a fun Saturday to watch football.
Absolutely. A couple questions off of that. I was thinking about that game. You're running, it looked like cover 0 to me at their own 3-yard line, up 29-0. Like, why? Make them drive. They hadn't shown that they could drive the ball down the field at all in the first half. And even if they get a 7-minute drive, I mean, you've accomplished taking 6 minutes off the clock. It seemed like a bad play call, and then obviously bad execution. When a receiver like that gets really hot, and fans, people who are watching the game, be like, how does that guy get open? How does he keep getting the ball? Like, as a defender, and they've got one guy, or that's who they're targeting. Like, have you felt in the past, like, God, we can't stop this guy? No matter what defense we call, what coverage we have, whoever we put on him. Like, have you been in the position where you're like, God, we just can't stop this guy?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a situation where you just had where a guy just got hot, quarterback and wide receiver duo just got really, really got moving. And it's more of a what's my technique? What did I do wrong on that? And sometimes you don't figure it out until you get to go back and just review the game film. So I think Travis will grow and learn from how he played. But you also have to think about what they started calling to take advantage of how Colorado really was playing their coverages. They play off a lot. Like, so Travis was really back off the ball. When you have a receiver that big and can run that fast, it's like pitch and catch, right? If you're going to stay back eight yards off the ball, I'm going to throw a hitch. I'm going to throw a slant. I'm just going to ask you to tackle him. And then all of a sudden, now the momentum swung and they started feeling really confident. And now you're like, okay, I've got to get up. But you're kind of like, he was such a big focal point of the offense. It's now I haven't conditioned. I haven't been able to do all the things that I'm used to doing because of the injury. So now it's how well is my conditioning? Am I in the right mind frame to kind of go out and do this? And up until this point, he hadn't really been challenged like that. Nobody really challenged him and went specifically at him and said, we're going to try to go deep. They would test him early in games, and then he would make the play and they would go back to the other side. So kudos to Stanford just saying, we're going to test him and see if he's going to be able to hold up. And you could tell, especially late in the game, you could just tell that he was definitely getting a little winded. He was definitely trying to figure out how to play it. And I've been in that where big receivers sometimes will have that adverse effect on corners because Travis is a lean guy. Yes, he can run with it, but a big guy can box you out. He can put you on his hip and push you and move you around and still make that catch. And stride for stride, they probably can go for it. But coming off an injury, Travis Hunter is maybe not at 100% as what you would want to see at the beginning of the season. So it just snowballed. And that's where coaching's got to be like, oh, how are we going to fix it? Can we roll coverages to him? I would have loved to see them maybe do a 3 cloud at sometimes to kind of take advantage of it, show that you're off, have Travis come down in a cloud position, rotate everybody over, rotate your middle safety over, strong safety back to the middle, corner over. Like you could have done some things to protect and make Stanford's quarterback realize, hey, we're not in cover one and we're not playing man to man. But when you say you're the best corner in the country, team's going to challenge you, and Stanford challenged you.
Stanford, obviously, it's a smart school. That's what they're known for. And you wonder if they noticed he was gassed, like you said.
Yeah, he definitely was gassed. You could tell he was gassed.
And you almost feel like, hey, maybe at halftime, if you're Colorado, like maybe you say, hey, you're not playing offense for the rest of the game. You got 29 points. Like focus on defense. Keep your wind for the defensive side of the ball because we've already scored enough to ask him to play. Both sides the entire game after not playing for a few weeks. It's kind of a recipe for disaster. Before we move on to next week, obviously we touched on the Irish in the beginning. I kudos to you for your call.
Do you want to say anything else? Do you want to say?
Well, I was going to give you your flowers. I was too emotional and too angry from them laying an egg against Louisville to kind of see where you saw this game going. I don't think anybody saw, the defensive dominance that Notre Dame had. And afterwards I thought about it and I read on Twitter, I guess the main importance for the game for a program like Notre Dame, that was their biggest recruiting weekend of the year.
Sure was.
And that's what people maybe
best time to kind of bring out, like, listen, here's what we're building. Yes, we know we came up short a couple weeks and people will go back, and I'll leave it to the pundits to go back and say they were looking a week ahead to the USC game. They didn't take Louisville seriously. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, when they step on the field, they've got to go out and execute. But it looked like a team that played with reckless abandon, knowing that they really didn't have anything to lose, right? Like, okay, another loss is not going to affect us in the playoff scenario because we're out. Now it's just, let's go out of here and get recruits and show them, like, this is why you should come to Notre Dame. This is why, this is how we handle the top-notch talent. And this is what you could be a part of going forward. And knowing that, all right, next year it's going to look different in the playoff scenario. So 2 losses won't keep you out. So they did exactly what we talked about last week of just building, trying to get some continuity. They got the ball to their playmakers, which I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, where has this been?
They ran the ball. It was complete dominance. They got after Caleb Williams. They were able to bring pressure, which is something they weren't able to do. So just kind of like they pinned their ears back. They threw caution to the wind. And I'm looking forward to seeing if this is going to be the Notre Dame blueprint going forward for how they play for the rest of the season.
Well, interestingly enough, they finally get a bye because, remember, they started a week early in Ireland. So it's been a they only have 4 games left. They're now 6-2.
That's
So
right. I forgot about that.
It's been a gauntlet of 8 straight weeks with a trip to Europe, which famously around here we know all about trips to Europe and what that might have done to a team, whatever else. So they've run 8 straight weeks against 4 night games in a row. 4 ranked opponents. Excuses are what they are, but that was a gauntlet. And it was really, after I calmed down, after I got over the disappointment of it, I thought to myself, to go 6-2 in that stretch and to dominate your biggest rival at home is quite an accomplishment. You're not going to win the national championship, but man, it speaks volumes. And that was a great setting. You're on national television. But Marlon, I got to talk to you for a minute. The announcers are awful. The sound quality of the game was terrible, which a lot of people were commenting on. Jack Collinsworth, somehow, some way, he's worse than his dad. I'm sorry. He's flat. I don't love it. I'm so sick of listening to Chris Collinsworth Sunday Night Football. It feels like he's been in my life too long. But Jack is flat. And then, unfortunately, they pair him with Jason Garrett, who I don't get it. I'm sorry. I don't get it. I miss Mike Tirico. I do. Mike Tirico makes every game feel important. He makes it feel big. I understand that they moved him from Notre Dame to Sunday Night Football when Al Michaels left. Man, that's a rough 2 guys. I can't do it with the 2 of them anymore. It literally takes away the enjoyment of the game for me.
It was an interesting experience listening to the game. Like, man, I'm like, could I do this? Could I do this differently? Like, what would I have said in this? Like, you're right. It was the emotion that you're looking for wasn't there, and maybe it's just because the tie. They're trying to be as neutral as they can and just really talk positively about both teams, and I don't know, but yeah, you're right. It was definitely, it was like watching the Ohio State game earlier on Peacock, and I'm just like, okay, the broadcasting and the announcers just. Where's the fire? Where's the passion? This is college football. This is not an NFL game. So you need to kind of match the intensity and the environment that you're in. And they did not match it. And the crowd was going crazy. And they could have brought a random student out and said, hey, listen, cover this game and talk about it. And there would have been a lot more energy and passion.
Marlon, you and I would have at least brought excitement and like you said, passion. And, I wouldn't have been neutral, but it's tough to watch a game where the announcers are flat. And the rest of the game isn't. I don't need Gus Johnson to call every game.
Right,
I don't need screaming and yelling. But the guys like Kirk Herbstreit, and when Chris Fowler used to do it, when Chris Fowler does it now, and Reese Davis and Ian Eagle and those guys, there's just kind of that nice mix between But man, Jack Collinsworth, I'm hoping that this is the last season. And like I said, NBC.
Well, he may get better. I will say he may get better. I think.
But his on-the-job training. I sound like my late father. Notre Dame shouldn't be on the job training. That's a big broadcast. It's a big broadcast,
game. But it's kind of like, all right, who do we have? And they see something in him that maybe we don't. And sometimes you just got to get the feedback and say, listen, I need you to be like this. You need to be this. Here's what people are saying. And I'm sure he's going to take the feedback that has been given from the executives and even from the school and kind of say, listen, yeah, we've got to be better about it. Or maybe they told him, just kind of tone it down. We don't want you with all the passion and the bravado and everything. We need you to keep it even keel, keep it straight, just talk about the game. So, it was different. It was unique.
You're more diplomatic than I am, my friend.
I'm gonna take the diplomatic road because I don't watch every Notre Dame game. I'll come back, check the highlights, go back and forth.
Right.
So that was really my first complete experience from watching from start to finish, except for the Ohio State game. But again,
he didn't do that game.
He didn't do that game.
He was sick, so it was still NBC, but he was sick. So that's where you would have noticed the difference. Did you ever think about going into broadcasting?
Not really. No. This is just. This is as close as I'll get. I've done some high school games and called some UB games back in the day, and just some of the local schools here. But outside of that, yeah, I like watching football. That's it, and talking about football now.
It seems like the former players, though, the ones who do it, they seem to really enjoy it for the most part. I think
it's a lot of fun, just learning it and being able to say, oh, you missed that, or seeing this and talk about that experience. Yeah, as a former player, you can see things sitting that high up, but it's just trying to get to that level, that was never really a goal of mine, or really trying to do something on that path. So I just kind of said, this is fun. This right here is where I'm like, I can talk about college football. This is late. This is a lot more fun.
This is great. Did you ever think about coaching?
Absolutely not. Never wanted to coach. Like, it's just different. Like, I don't think I have the patience to be a coach. I do like helping guys figure out how to play their positions, understand how to understanding coverages and reading coverages and things like that. But outside of coaching, I did, as a player, I'm just like, I lived in Williamsville when I played, because of the fact that I wanted to feel like when I left work, I was leaving work, and I didn't want to live in Hamburg or Orchard Park to see the stadium when I drove by to go to. So when I went to the grocery store or something like that. So as a coach, I knew how much time was put into it. I was like, there's no way I would want to spend more time studying film and coming up with game plans and doing all these things. Like, coaches are there longer than players. And we were always there pretty late. And then you hear about coaches staying till 11. Yeah. Sometimes sleeping in their offices till 2 or 3 in the morning. Like, I'm good. Like, I'm good. That's not what I want to do.
It becomes your life. And I can totally understand why a former player who reached the levels that you reached, like, the idea that you'd go in and do 90 hours a week seems kind of crazy to me. Like you already gave so much of your life, to football and your passion, and to then turn around. People don't, some people don't realize the grind of being, a position coach or a coaching assistant like I was. I mean, I was there. I slept there every Monday night. So, and not for a lot of money back then, but like that's, so I the broadcasting part of it, I could see the appeal. Like, you fly into the city, you meet with the head coach, you meet with the quarterback, you're getting kind of the best of everything, and you're staying around the game without the grind of Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. So
there's still that grind though. Like, even as broadcast, like, like, you're doing, like, you still got to do your homework, right? Like, and so just from doing some of the high school games and doing some of the, like, the Buff State games and some UB games, I would literally create, a friend of mine had a template. Like, here's my template, use this. So I had the whole, here's the form, like, offense, defense. You had the whole, what's their format? What formations they run? Or their spread offense? And we had the templates, and you would go in and plug in numbers, and you would go in and plug in names. So I'm doing homework all week for a game. So it doesn't change. Like, I'm going through looking at their two deep. You're looking at all the stats. You're going back looking at all the games. Like, you're learning about the player. Like, he went to high school here. His mom and dad went here. He has this tie here. So even as a broadcaster, you're still studying and doing all the things that you would do as a player, so that you can come in and talk about it. Because if it's a blowout, then you got to ad lib and add some interesting side notes and kind of talk about and have anecdotes and have stories to talk about. Like, hey, we talked about this player. And then depending on what level you're doing, on certain days, you're doing interviews and you're talking to players and you're talking to coaches and kind of going back, like, he did this, he said this, and they're looking for this, and then I called one game and all the kids dyed their hair blonde because that was like their thing. So what's the story behind that? Why do they do that? Yeah. So like all those things that you don't necessarily think about, no matter what profession you go into, you start realizing, like, you know what? I don't know if I really want to take that to the next level, because I mean, even to do a podcast like this, I'm taking notes on games. Like, I'm going through researching things, like going back, looking at, hey, I've got this game on tape. Let me go back and look at it. You can go find all of them, trying to find all 22 versions of it. Look at it. Oh, he missed this. Here's the coverage. So as a player, you're like, you go back to what you know that you're used to doing. So you go back and approach it the same way. And so I know me, like, that's a whole nother job. And that's a job on top of a job that I'm already working. So when do you have time to balance it with your family and your kids? Now I'm close to that almost empty nest style. So, and my kids are old enough, so it would be fun now to spend more time doing it and maybe have the opportunity to call a few games, because I don't have to worry about traveling to a track meet or a basketball game or a football game anymore. So I might be open to maybe doing some of that more now, but when the kids are little, absolutely not.
Well, you made the right choice. That's a respectable choice that I saw. Unfortunately, my time in the NFL, a lot of guys picked football over their family, and that's obviously a personal decision, whatever else. But man, football is it's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of glory and there's a lot of reward, but man, there's a lot of sacrifice too. And you're not the only one in your family that's sacrificing, to try to gain somewhere. Some of these college coaches famously have been 12, 13, 14 different stops in 20 years, and you're that grind. So you clearly made a great choice. And it'd be interesting to see if, a couple years down the road, some local team or whatever, is interested. I think you do great. Speaking of doing great, let's talk about Ohio State, Penn State here. Let's talk a little bit about your Buckeyes. And I know before we preview the matchup this week, it's really the big marquee game. It's at noon. I'm assuming game day and big Fox News big Saturday is going to be in Columbus. I know you've mentioned a couple times to me that you're not a big fan of going to Happy Valley. This game's obviously in Columbus, but talk to me about your time against Penn State. Like, did they always feel like the second biggest rival?
No. Well, I got them because I'm old, and I'm not afraid to say it. I'm old, but we played them when their inaugural 2 seasons into the Big Ten. So the first year we played them, it was at home. It was a kind of a overcast day turned into some light rain, into some snow flurries. So the conditions just got really muddy and sloppy. So there wasn't really a lot of like crazy passing going along. It was more of we're going to grind it out, try to run the ball. It was really literally like a 2 yards in a cloud of dust, old school Woody Hayes, just because we had a natural grass field. It got really sloppy. It's a lot of slipping going on. We had Raymond Harris, who had a good game against them, and we ended up winning that game 24-6. And we limited to their big plays. Like Kajana Carter was there. He really didn't get too many yards off on us. Like we really did a good job of containing him. Our defensive line played very well up front, was in the backfield. Corey Stringer was one of our tackle, and he had a monster game. And we just were able to just really control that game. And so we were coming back off that season and feeling really confident. But Penn State was rolling. Like they literally had that offense going. I mean, Kerry Collins and Kyle Brady and Kajana Carter, and they had Bobby Ingram, and so they had and they had another receiver, and I could see his face, but I can't think of his name. I want to say Freddie, and I forget his last name. But they had 2 guys on the outside that could make plays for them, and then they were really good at running the ball, and their fullbacks were huge. Like their fullbacks were like Mike Allstott size, and they didn't really give him the ball that much because Kajana was that good. And we went down to Happy Valley the next year, and I was co-captain with Joey Galloway that year, and it was that season it was weird just all the way around. Like Joey was suspended early. We got a loss early in the season, and we were just trying to get our season on track. For some reason, it just never materialized. Like we never had the focus right. I can't put my finger on what it was or why it never shook out. And we got there just kind of like, all right, look, if we can get back and just in a rhythm, we can get back and get more and rolling. And from the onset, they were very physical. They were more physical with us at the line of scrimmage. It was a whiteout for them, so their stadium was packed.
Night game.
It was a day game.
Okay.
And we decided to change it up as a team. We decided we were going to wear all black socks, and we didn't really. We talked about it as a team. And we decided we were all going to do that. So we all went out and bought our own black socks, and we didn't tell our coaches staff that we were going to do it. We just kind of said, this is going to be us. We wanted to kind of set a statement and say, this is us. This is what we're going to be. And we just didn't play well after that. And people would be like, oh, mentally you weren't there. It was just we just didn't play good. Like sometimes you just have that. You can't really put your finger on it, why you don't play well, what it is. I think there was just a lot of things going on throughout the season. And then all of a sudden you get to that game and we're all in all black socks and the coach is like, what is this? And like, hey coach, like we're coming out to play. And sometimes when you're young, you don't think about it like that. Coach is like, all right, you put a bullseye on your back. Like, you better come out and play well or else everybody's going to be talking about you wore black socks. You try to do something different. Your uniform's not the same, and you guys lay a goose egg. And we laid a goose egg. Like, it was one of those games where it was 7-3 at the end of the first quarter. And like, okay, we get a stop here, get the ball back, offense get rolling. We can make this thing closer. And then the second quarter is where they just exploded on us. And then it was touchdown 14-3. And then we don't really move the ball on offense, and they score again, and it's 21-3. And then we turn the ball over or do something in that quarter. They get the ball back, and they scored a touchdown that shouldn't have been a touchdown that they called. And then it's 28-3. And then by the half, it's 35-3 at the half. You're like, oh my gosh, like what the heck happened? And so now you have to go in there and say, okay, what adjustments are we going to make on defense and offense to slow down on defense? What are you going to do to slow down their offense? On offense, what can we do to get some type of energy going against them? and it never happened. Like they beat us in all phases. They beat us on offense. They beat us on defense, special teams. Like it was just one of those games where the onslaught happened. Every time I heard that little Nittany Lion roar, I was just like, yeah, I'm done. I'm over it. I'm done with it.
So I just went on Wikipedia, and it was October 29th, 1994, and it ended up 63-14.
Yeah.
And they were number one in the country.
They ended up being number one in the country. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the year. Yeah, wow. I mean, 63-14. God, and when you're on the road and a team, it's funny you mentioned like the little Nittany Lion. It's like the Miami Dolphins like fight song. Like when they score a touchdown and you hear that stupid Miami Dolphins, and it gets rolling and it gets in your head. Or we were in the Metrodome and they play that awful Viking horn, and Randy Moss lit us up in 2000. And he scored like twice, and that every time they get a first down, it's that. So it's funny how you remember those things, and those things kind of stick in your head. Was that the toughest like road atmosphere you played in college? Was that tougher than Michigan? Louder?
They were loud. Like it was loud. The times we went to Michigan, I mean, their crowds were loud, but it was a rivalry game, so you always kind of expect their crowds to be loud. But that was the first time going into Happy Valley and seeing it, and seeing that type of environment in the whiteout and how seriously they took it. And I was just like, okay, it was definitely louder at some points than being in the shoe at times, just the way it was set up. But again, as a player, you don't really remember how loud their crowd gets. I love being on defense because the louder they screamed, like it was like white noise. You tuned it out when the play happened. And so it was more of you just kind of get there. But that was one of those ones where you noticed it the most, like because of the way it was such a blowout fashion. Like we really weren't a part of too many games where we were this so far out of a game, so physically overmatched. I mean, Kajana, and we talk about Kajana, like we all grew up in Columbus. Like Kajana, he came to Ohio State on recruiting trips. We were all trying to get Kajana. People trying to like talk, hey man, you coming to Ohio State? I'm going to Ohio State. You coming? What you gonna do? And I remember we bumped into each other. It's like, yo, what are you thinking about doing? And there he's like, I'm thinking about Penn State. I'm like, oh, okay, like I get it, but Ohio State had offered him and wanted him to come there, and it was one of those things where Ohio State had just a lot of running backs at the time, and Penn State didn't have as many running backs at the time, and Kajana proved to be like the one that ended up being the best there. And so it was the right decision for him. But yeah, we had a lot of talent come out of Ohio, particularly in Columbus around that time, just going to Division I schools. And it was pretty cool to see the decision that he made and how it paid out.
What's it like seeing a guy like that after getting blown out? You're on the field after the game. You get a hug, you shake hands. Did you guys do the jersey exchange back then? Is that
no? We didn't do. You don't do jersey swaps in college. You just kind of get there. Like it was one of those things where you're like, listen, we got absolutely trounced, and it was ugly. And you knew what was about to come and happen after that game, because you had practiced all week. You really thought you had a good game plan. It was proven that the game plan didn't work, right? And so what always happens is when game plans don't work, most times coaches don't say, that's on me. Like, I didn't put you in the right position. It's, what the heck were you guys doing? You didn't execute. And so then you go in and you have to go watch the game film, and you could see like, well, yeah, you know what? We didn't execute here. We didn't execute here. If I had stayed more disciplined in this back pedal during this instance, maybe this catch doesn't happen. If I make the tip here or make the interception there, they don't get another set of downs to kind of come back. So you have to go back and listen to that. But it was the first time we had kind of deviated from our normal dress code. Like we had never really done that as a team. And so, when the captain's okay it, like, as a captain, you have to then take responsibility. Like, listen, the team came to us, they wanted to do it. We said, okay, we didn't think anything wrong with it as captains. And, so, like once you do that, the responsibility is coming back to the captains. So that's where Joey and I are going to have to answer for everything that would happen that we decided as a team. And then you just kind of go back and like, okay, listen, like you got to play better. And I was kind of in this weird little funk that season of just trying to play well, because you just really wanted to get to the ultimate goal, which is try to get to the NFL. And so when people ask me like, well, how did you handle it? it was a lot to try to process. Like, I was coming off of a season where my high school teammate was killed in a car wreck. And so I wore his jersey in the bowl game prior to that season. We played in the Holiday Bowl, and it was one of the worst games I ever played as a player. And I probably should not have played because mentally I was not in the right headspace for that game. But we played, we won anyway. And then you try to build upon it going into the spring. You try to do all those things. I had early in training camp separated my shoulder. So, I mean, there were so many things going on. Like, I had a grade 3 shoulder separation, and they were talking about surgery. And I was going to miss like 5 or 6 weeks, maybe 4 games at the most with the bye added. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So I'm playing on one shoulder for most of the season. Like, literally, I can't bench press the entire football season. The only thing I could really do was after a point, I got well enough to be able to do close grip bench. So while everybody else is doing this and had their shoulders to be able to go and wrap around, I'm close grip. That's all I could do the entire season was close grip bench. Like, there was just so many things going on. And then you just get to that game, and that was one of the games where we just didn't play well. And I particularly just had moments in that game where I just did not play well. Just too many mental mistakes, too many errors where we're just thinking too much, overthinking things. And then, so that's where you talk about Ohio State. Like, you've got to be able to weather the storm. And I remember it because we were making mistakes. We just weren't talking to each other, hand signals right. And it was the first time I noticed the crowd really impacted, like, how we were playing and how we thought the game and how we processed things. I noticed it the most during that game, just in my own play and how I was hearing things. And I was just like, wow, like, we've got to be able to overcome these things. And you try to, like, teams now, they practice that, like, the Bills, being around that. And I know Ohio State has, like, every team now has artificial ways to bring in and pump in crowd noise and pump and play music to really get you distracted. So it's something you become accustomed to. But that was the first time, like, we were really in it back then, where it was just nonstop, loud, crazy the entire game. Like, and that's why the game plan as players and as a visiting team was always, you got to get up on a team early like that. You have to take their crowd out of it, because then you can kind of make your adjustments. You can make them doubt. You can make them feel like, all right, this is not it. But they rolled. Like, they rolled on us. And
it's
it was a good learning experience.
It's disconcerting, right? Like, it's not necessarily intimidating, but God, when the crowd just gets going and you're on the sideline or you're on the field and you're trying to communicate in some way, and the crowd is just nonstop, and there's 100,000 people there, right? I mean, that's one of the largest stadiums, on earth. And I mean, imagine, for people listening, imagine having a really bad day at work, but you're doing it with 100,000 people yelling at you. Like, that's, I mean, that's a nightmare. Like, it's a nightmare. All of us have had bad days, bad moments, whatever, but there's 100,000 people and, probably 5-10 million people watching on TV. And
it was 30 game. Everybody's watching that game. It was like billed as the matchup, the rematch. Can Penn State come back? And that was the best team that I saw all season long. I don't understand how they didn't get voted to be the national champion, because they didn't have the playoff back then. It was just the voters, the college writers would come back and vote, and they voted somebody else. It wasn't Penn State. I want to say maybe a Pac-12 team, but they didn't win the national championship. And I was like, that was a travesty in itself, because they beat everybody. They rolled on everybody that entire season. So it's one of those things where you just kind of look at it like, look, at the end of the day, they were the better team that season. We understood how we needed to do and what we needed to do. And we ended up kind of coming back and figuring it out, how to play. And we ended up going to a bowl game that season, and we played Alabama in a New Year's Day bowl, but definitely not the standard of what it is now, and the expectations of playing for a national championship. Like, we were definitely out of that picture with some just losses early on in the season, and I ended up figuring out how to get that quote unquote mojo back to go back and play. We just kind of mentally figured it out. I found out that I needed to be more even keel.
Okay.
I was too high and low in games and became a little too emotional. So once I learned how to do and practice a little bit better emotional regulation, then that play came better. And I remember we played Michigan State, and we ended up winning that game, and we ended up started making plays. Like, you ever just been in a scenario, and as a coach, where you talk to players, you're just like, you're pressing too hard. You're really trying too hard. Like, stop trying so hard. Let the game come to you. Stop trying to go make plays. Stop trying to go do this. Like, I felt like that was us as a unit. Like, we had a chance to we had a really good team the year before. And we really wanted to try to build upon that because a lot of us were all coming back, and we had got as high as 3 in the nation the year before and ended up being like 1-1. And so, you're like, all right, let's build upon that. Let's come back and do that. And we were really pressing as a team and just really tried to do some things that uncharacteristic with us. And that was me. Like, I was pressing so hard the entire season because I really wanted to play well. It was your last chance to go out and win an outright Big Ten championship. You want to do all these things that you really wanted to do to leave that legacy at Ohio State, and just really tried way too hard to do some things. And I'll never forget it because it just started clicking after the Wisconsin game or after the Michigan State game. We got there, we did some things. And so I remember we were doing, and as a young guy, we always talk about how you communicate, right? Like, how do you communicate with a coach? How do you communicate with a player? And I remember this because we played a certain style of defense, and the coach would always say, keep everything in front and then break and make the tackle, right? And so we played that. And so, to my understanding and how I understood how the coach wanted to play, it was, don't let anybody get behind you, which I didn't do that game. But they were catching out, and I would just break up and make the tackle. They would catch and hitch, I would break up and make the tackle. And then we flipped side. I was with some really good players. So Sean Springs was a corner, and he had a different take on how to play it. And so, like, again, this is where you don't talk about things, where coach, like, where you understand it one way. And so I'm like, okay, coach, like, I've done everything you asked me to do. Like you said, keep everything in front, break on it, make the tackle. And he's like, no, what I meant was, after the game, now, when you have these conversations, like, hey, what do you mean by that? Like, well, what I meant is you don't give him anything deep, but when he breaks on it, you need to be there when he stops at 7 yards. Like, you should be right there. I'm like, well, that's not what you said, right? As a coach. And this is where it matters. So if you're a coach out there, it really matters when you say, keep everything in front and break. Like, you have to really go into more detail and break it down to help your players really understand, because you may be thinking you're expressing it one way, and the player, in this case, me as a player, was taking it as literally like, keep everything in front and break the tackle. We don't want to give up anything deep, right? And so, we get there. But I remember the night before, because it stood out to me. It really helped me put everything in perspective after this game. Was I was called my mom or my aunt the night before a game, just kind of talk about what's going on, like who we're going, like, how's the family doing. And so I called my mom, who was in Germany at the time. And so my stepdad was in the Air Force. And so they were in Germany. And so she didn't answer. And so then I called my aunt, like, hey, just checking in, just touching base. And so we talked for maybe 35 minutes. And that's back when they had call waiting. So you could hear the line click, right? Yep. Like, so, I'm sitting there listening, and we're just talking, and the phone's like clicking. And I want to say there was probably 25 to 30 clicks on this particular phone call. So, like, every time click, okay, I'll get him in a minute. Like, you need to get that, go ahead. She's like, no, I'll get it in a minute. I'm like, look, go ahead, take the phone call. I'm gonna get ready and get prepared for this game. So we get off the phone, we play the game, we win. I come back, and all of a sudden people are calling me. Like, I get back home, and I get the phone call, like, hey, I'm gonna come pick you up. Everybody's at, my aunt, one of my other aunt's house. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? Like, we're just all hanging out. I'm like, what's going on? And I'm going through, and I name all these things. And so I'm like, hey, something happened to my uncle, happened to my mom, happened to my brother. Like, I go to all my family, like, no, we'll talk when you get there. And then all of a sudden, I have a friend of mine that I grew up with, and she's like, hey, I'm so sorry. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, I'm so sorry. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I literally just got back in town like 20 minutes ago. I just got home. And she's like, oh, like, I'm sorry about your aunt. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, so, oh, you don't know? I'm like, no, I don't know what's going on. And so then I make another phone call. I'll call my cousin, like, what the heck is going on? He's like, dude. And so he tells me that my aunt had got killed that time. And so her daughter was calling and trying to tell her, like, and kept calling to kind of say, y'all need to get over here. Right. And so I had to spend the entire week, like, thinking and processing that and just going through. And then when it was all said and done, like, I just kind of thought about it. And the crazy thing about that was, I had just talked to her, like, probably a couple days prior. We had talked, and she had called me and said, hey, I want to come to a game. And I said, okay, our next home game is this. Let's touch base next week, and I'll get you tickets for the game, and we'll come in and we'll just talk. Because I hadn't talked to her probably a little while, and she hadn't come to a game. And I'm like, okay. And then we never got the chance to talk again. And she never got the chance to come see me play at Ohio State in the shoe. And so just kind of one of those things where you kind of put everything in perspective.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden I just kind of said, you know what? I'm pressing about trying to go to the NFL. I'm pressing about all these things. And she's not here. She's not here anymore. And so it helped me kind of go back to, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this game? Who am I playing this game for? And I went back and just kind of thought amongst myself. Like I collected all my thoughts and was just talking to coaches, like, you okay? And, I'm like, listen, I'm gonna miss practice. I'm gonna miss this. I got to go to a funeral on this day. Okay, no problem. And all those things happen. And our coaches are really supportive. And then I just kind of realized, like, at the end of the day, it's a game, right? And it's a game that is going to either help you propel and go to another level, or teach you life lessons that you can use and still help propel you to another level. So either way I go, it's a win-win. But the NFL is going to be there regardless. So stop stressing and pressing and playing for the NFL and just kind of play it for all the right reasons. And after that, I just started saying, I'm playing because I love the game. I'm not playing for anything else. I'm playing because I really went back to when I was 4 and I fell in love with the sport, and it's just kind of like, I love football. I just want to play football. And I just went back and said, I'm just going to go back and play football.
That's amazing.
And everything just clicked.
That's amazing to have that much insight being that young. It takes a lot of people a long, long time if they ever find, that insight. And it's unfortunate. Right. Obviously, it's really unfortunate that it took a death, something tragic to happen. And, major props there for kind of taking that and making something positive out of it. Talking about like pressing and you're right. You can want something too much, and then it gets in the way, and you see that sometimes with teams. Teams are too hyped up. Guys are too ready. They're too emotional.
Yep.
I've seen it with my friends who are dating, and you could just tell very obviously, like, man, they like stop, like just chill,
pump
like
the
be
brakes,
yourself,
pump
the brakes. Like you're just gonna, you're gonna make it's too much coming on too strong. Like it's funny how whether any part of life, if you want something too much, you can push people away. You can make bad decisions. You can, on the football field, I'm sure, just over pursue all the rest. So, before we wrap up here, obviously you've got memories against Penn State. It's a big game. Ohio State,
a huge game.
Basically had 3. When you look at their season, there was Notre Dame, there's Penn State, and then there's Michigan. So, and probably in that order of importance for Ohio State season, the last 2 being Big Ten games, et cetera, et cetera. So you're a player, this is going to air Thursday afternoon. Talk me through from Thursday afternoon until a noon Saturday kickoff. What does it look like for you in these next 48 hours?
For me personally, I'm just going to relax and kind of watch Twitter and just laugh. But as a player, what's happening is you're going through the rest of the scouting report. Okay. You're going to get a couple more practices. And so tomorrow's going to be the last practice. So you'll go through all the scenarios, depending on what they practice. They're probably doing some red zones, some 2-minute drills, going through all those things of, we're going to do this. If they get into formation, we're going to do that. This is what their favorite group of plays to run. If they get into the high red zone, this is the group of plays they like to run. If they get into the low red zone, here's what they're going to do. If they go on goal line, here's their gotta have it plays. If they need to do a Hail Mary, this is the formation they're going to get into. This is the route combination that they run. You're going to practice all those things and go through all of that just to get ready. And then you kind of get your last minute meetings and walk through. You get your last bit of film and prep work done. You get your last chance to kind of look up any things that the receivers do, any route combinations that they run where they might tip it off, right? Where, how is he, if he's running out, does he do anything with his hands? Does he point his foot a specific way? Does he put the opposite foot wrong so he can make the cut easier? Does he tap on his helmet or do something like that when they run certain things? Like, you're looking for all those things to kind of make sure you can get any keys to figure out what they may or may not do in certain things. You're looking at hand signals. Like, when they do this hand signals, what was a route combination on that? And then Friday is more of a, since it's a home game for them, then it's more of a, you go through your normal routine. You normally have a walkthrough on Friday. So you're going to walk through, and what the walkthrough is kind of, you walk through some plays that you really want to make sure you really focus on, but it's also a way to walk through all the plays that maybe you made a mistake of during the week. So, hey, we kept making a mistake on this formation. We're going to walk through this again. Let's talk it through. Here's a route combination we expect to see. If we get in this formation, they're going to do this. Marlon, you got to be here. Josh Proctor, you got to be here. Going back, looking at that. Denzel Burke, you've got to be in this position here. And you talk through all those things and kind of say, this is what we got to do. Linebacker fits here. Do you understand the concept? Yep. Walk it through. And then normally you'd have a team meal together. You all get showered, you get dressed, and you kind of all walk through, get on a bus, and do that normal routine. Get your last team meal, do whatever you do for the evening. Back when I played, we always did just a movie as a group. So for a home game, they would take us to We would go to the country club, have dinner, then we would go movie as a group, then we go to the hotel, right? And then you kind of get your last minute snacks, you go over any last minute scouting reports. You always have like that last minute meeting with your position breakdown, talk about it. And the coach is gonna be like, all right, guys, look, we got a good test. Like, they have a good offense. Like, we've talked through it, we're prepared, the whole hit, let's go over the whole game plan again. Let's talk it through. Like, they're going to give you some more films to watch. You probably spend about 30 minutes in there watching film. Just for the last minute, hey, here's their big plays. Like, you guys got to get ready. And then we talk through, here's our mindset approach. Like, we're not going to give up any big plays. Like, okay, think about it. So make sure you're here. This is the route we want to give them. This is where we want them to come. We're going to flap and tackle. And so you go through all those things. And then come Saturday morning, you're up, by a specific time. Everybody knows what their routine is. Like,
do you sleep well? Do you sleep well Friday night?
Yeah, I slept fine Friday night.
Okay.
You kind of, because at that point, you're just kind of like, I know I need to get some rest. So everyone has their own time when they go to sleep. Like, some guys can sleep like a baby. They go to bed early. I was kind of one of those guys, like by 11:30, I'm trying to make sure I get some rest. It's a noon game. It's a noon kickoff. So you don't get to have the luxury of like, I'm gonna stay up late and kind of study a little bit more. Like, I got to get to bed. Like, I need to get some rest. So you sleep, and some guys will like, take take a nice hot shower. Some guys will bring some Epsom. So I've seen guys do all kind of things, like bring some Epsom salt with them and then take a bath. When they get up there, and just soak a little bit, get their muscles relaxed and get ready to go. Like, guys do some things to make sure they get their mind mentally right. And then you're up for a pregame. You get your breakfast together as a group. You do whatever tradition we had. Like, they do some of the things, running out and doing the walks as a team. And then you get there on the specific buses. And then you just now it's like, it's real, and you get ready and you go through, you get your taping for your ankles and anything else you might need to get taped up. And then you get ready, and then it's out. Whatever group comes out first. I was a special teams guy, so I would come out, do some things, warm up a little bit, watch their long snappers to try to get anything, watch their punt returners. And then you come back, get your pads back on, get everything ready to go. And then it's kickoff, noon kickoff. That's an early kickoff.
I'm sure it's on you. A noon kickoff is on you probably.
Yeah, it's
before
quick.
You realize it. Like, it's a quick morning. So, all right. So let's, two questions before we leave here. So let's say Ohio State wins the game. You were in a lot of noon kickoff big games. What does 8:00 p.m. look like for 19-year-old Marlon after a big Saturday win?
After a big Saturday win, for me, I'm probably hanging out with some friends. I had a good friend of mine. His name is Ron Cunningham. I think I might have mentioned him in the first episode. So he played football, and he has the one, and so I'll give him his kudos and his props. So we called him Buster. That was his nickname. And so Buster went to Wittenberg, and our goal was to try to be All-Americans right now. So Buster was a 2-time Division III All-American.
Wow.
I didn't get the All-American status, so sorry. So he definitely got the one up on me. But if he had a game or a home game, and if he was coming home, he would come home. So during after the Ohio State game, if he wasn't playing, I was like, yo, you come to the game, I'll leave you some tickets, right? So we did that, and so that was my best friend. We always hung out. So he and I would just hang out. Like, we would just like catch up. What we're going to do, we might hang out, we might go out, we might go see family, just depending on what was going on. But I was always pretty chill after most games. Like, I didn't really do too much. If all the guys were going out, I might be like, yo, we going here. We might go to the club. But I was always kind of like, I wasn't a big drinker like that.
Sure.
So like,
are you wiped out? Are you wiped
tired
out after the game?
Yeah, you're definitely tired after the game. So that's why it was more, we just depended on how it was. And then you might go out a little bit, but then you're going to go home. So if it was like, hey, Marlon, come hang out with us. Like, yeah, I'll come hang out with my guys, with my teammates for a little bit. And then I'm going back home and just relax and chill. Like, I'm tired, I'm spent. But yeah, I think really what's going to happen and what determines this game and the victory and the keys to victory for Ohio State, as we call it, Marlon's keys. The keys for them really is the trenches. Like, the thing that we've noticed about Ohio State is their O-line and so far the D-line hasn't gotten too much pressure. They did against Purdue, so maybe that's a good sign. But the O-line has really been non-existent. They have been a non-factor. And against Purdue was the first time that you actually saw a semblance of or resemblance of a run game where they actually had holes that the running backs would go in. They actually were able to get to the second level. And so Penn State is going to propose a different type of test. Like, their D-line is going to get after it. And so now it's, can you control the offensive line, control their defensive line? Can our offensive line fire out? Can they get to the second levels? Is Travion Henderson healthy? Because he definitely makes a difference back there. And then is Maya Williams healthy? Because you want to power back. that you can run and offset with it. We lost our running back last week, and he's probably going to be in concussion protocol. So I'm not sure if he's going to be able to go. So Chip trained him. So he got a big hit last week. So he may or may not play. Waiting to hear word on that. But, that's the key to this is, can our offensive line really come in and play and own it? Because Penn State's going to try to stuff the run and make us one-dimensional. And then they're going to bring pressure and see if McCord can read the defenses and get after it. And we're going to find out. Like, it's a huge test. It's noon kickoff.
Sounds like you want to be there, buddy. Sounds like you want to be there this week.
Yeah, it would be fun to be there and see that, but I'm content and watching it and seeing it and taking my notes on my iPad and
climate controlled living room, right? There's nothing wrong with that.
Climate control is the best. Sitting there, I have the little recliner. I can pull that thing up and sit there and watch it on the big screen right in front of me with every snack I have without paying an arm and a leg for it.
That's right. So just a couple other games that I'm kind of looking forward to. I know your focus clearly is on the big one at noon. My adopted team this year, Air Force, who's still undefeated, 22nd in the country. I find them to be fascinating to watch. The way that their offensive line is able to get people off the ball and constantly create holes when everybody knows exactly what's coming is fascinating. They play Navy at noon.
Oh, that's gonna be fun.
The Commander-in-Chief trophy is going to be on the line. Air Force really has a legit shot to run the table. Clearly, they're not going to make the college football playoff. But, man, if they could sneak into – I'd love to see them sneak into a New Year's Six. I'd like to see them match up with a big boy team and see how if that option offense would translate against, a 2-loss Notre Dame or, a 2-loss Tennessee or something like that. I think I'm going to root for them for the rest of the year, obviously, because of, who they are, what they represent, but also because it's such a unique form of football that I like to see them when they level up and play against bigger competition, just to see how they do. At 3:30, once your game's over, you hopefully you'll be happy or crying. Tennessee's at Alabama.
I'm looking forward to that game. Yeah,
always a fun game. Washington State, Oregon as well. Oregon's going to be angry.
I want to see if Oregon can rebound. Like, is this going to be? Is this a hangover game? Do they feel like, man, we let one slip away? Like, one loss doesn't keep them out of it, and I think they could still have the opportunity to get to the Pac-12 championship with USC losing. So if they could run the table, and there's no guarantee that Washington runs the table either. So it's gonna be fun to watch. Like, that's the game I want to see if they can really bounce back.
Don't watch Minnesota, Iowa. Win or lose, don't watch that game at 3:30. That's a who can punt the ball faster game, in my opinion. And the night slate is not great. Michigan State, which unfortunately I don't think is going to be very competitive. And then the two big games, Utah USC is another one of those. Hey, we just got our ass kicked. Can we come back? Utah has dominated USC. They've kind of bullied them, and I'm curious to see whether USC dropped 8 spots to 18. And I'm curious to see whether they're going to get bullied again by another physical team. Utah is a bad matchup for USC. And
it's a really bad matchup coming off that loss and the way they got dominated physically by Notre Dame. Yeah, that's going to be can Caleb Williams bounce back? He just didn't look like there was so many pressure. And Utah's going to do the same thing. They're going to get after it. And USC needs to really kind of come back and avenge the loss that they had in the Pac-12 championship against Utah last year.
Absolutely. So, they've lost 2 years in a row to them. And then the final game, Duke and Florida State. Duke's been very competitive. They could have and should have knocked off Notre Dame. I feel like Florida State is just rolling, and I don't necessarily think it'll be all that competitive, but at least it's a challenge for Florida State after the last couple of weeks of seeing them, wax Syracuse last week. So that's the other game. Yeah, that's the other night game that's kind of interesting. So I'm
looking at that Ole Miss Auburn game. Like, it's one of those ones where it could be Ole Miss to score a whole lot of points, or it could be a very low scoring defensive battle. And I just want to see which one plays out in that game and see who's going to be the victor. I mean, Ole Miss is ranked 13, so on a paper standpoint, they should win this game, but it is the SEC football, and you already touched on Alabama. Like, Alabama is right where they need to be. Like, they're winning ugly games. Yep. They're going to have a chance to see what they can do. They're going to have an opportunity to get to that SEC championship, and then all of a sudden, we could talk about Alabama playing for a national championship or being in the college football playoff. Like they were in 2015 when they lost a regular season game. So,
and they're going to always get the benefit of the doubt. They're going to get the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, you're right.
I think the college football rankings, the first ones come out next week. So I'm curious to see that. Next week, I'm excited to talk to you about your blocked field goal against Wisconsin because Ohio State plays at Wisconsin. I need to talk to you about your celebration comparison to all your teammates and how they were really low key when it was clearly a huge play. So I look forward to that, and I look forward to talking to you after Ohio State, Penn State to gauge either what went right and what went
win
wrong.
Or lose. Look, fingers crossed. Hey, let's go Buckeye Nation. Listen. Coach Day, like, let's just get it. Like, let's start it from the kickoff. Let's take it to them right from the start and make it so they don't even know what happened to them.
There you go. So we'll see everybody. We'll see everybody next week. Go Irish.
Go Buckeyes.